All right, great. Well, so the person in charge, our moderator, and the IT folks have said it's okay to start, so we will. Good morning, everyone. I really am very excited to welcome everyone to our first in-person Veterinary Medical Board meeting in the last 2 years. And it has been a long 2 years, and I'm so excited to see everybody, and we can chat during lunch and network like we used to do all the time and took for granted. But it's a very it's exciting to be here, and I want to thank the board members. Everybody that's here today is here in person, which is, I think, a tribute to their dedication to travel up to SEC because they could have stayed home. And even the MDC yesterday was pretty much all in person, except for one person in the Bay Area. I also want to welcome Dr. Salcedo in person because she was appointed during the virtual years, and it's really nice to see you and meet you, and thank you very much. So I just wanted to see if any other board members have any comments, but again, thank you all for being here, and it's really nice to see everybody. Anybody? Comments as we begin our day? All right, terrific. All right, I guess the first thing we'll go to is establishment of a quorum. Let me just move.
Dr. Bradbury?
Here.
Ms. Laredo? Here. Dr. Noland?
Here.
Dr. Nunez?
Here.
Ms. Prado? Sorry, she's absent. Dr. Salcedo? Here. Ms. Bowler?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Before, excuse me, the first item on the agenda is always public comment on items not on the agenda. And before we move to that, I would like to remind individuals making comments to not discuss pending complaints, pending licensing applications, or pending disciplinary actions that may later come before the board for a decision. Such decisions are considered ex parte communications, as they could provide information to members that is outside of the record, and that's in violation of the Administrative Procedures Act. Such discussions could create a conflict and lead to the board decision being challenged in Superior Court. Accordingly, if an individual makes comments on a pending disciplinary matter, that individual's mic will be muted. The board, of course, can receive comments regarding the board's processes in general, but it can't receive comments on specific case circumstances where the decision is still pending. As always, outside of this meeting, our board staff will be available to speak to you about any pending matter. In addition, excuse me, public comments should address the board as a whole and not individual members. Please be aware that the public comment during this agenda item should provide information to the board members, but it is not a discussion between board members and the public. The only action board members can take right now is to listen to the comments and decide whether they want a future agenda item on that topic. Although this may seem at times like board members are not being responsive, following these guidelines is critical to ensure the rules of the Open Meeting Act are followed and to avoid compromising either the speaker's goals or the board's mission. In the interest of time, as we've done in the past, excuse me, we'd like to request that public comments not repeat statements made by a prior commenter. If you're in support of a statement made by a prior individual and your comments have already been made, please just state your name or association and your support of the previous commenter. Legislative hearings, as you know, do this all the time, and it's a very good way to ensure that we can, excuse me, hear from everyone today. Excuse me. Finally, I want to make a particular note that at the board's January 2022 meeting, the board agreed to allow a presentation by CVMA and other stakeholders regarding their specific concerns with the Veterinary Medicine Practice Act, statutes and regulations as applied to equine veterinary practices, and to offer any suggested legislative or regulatory proposals that might address their concerns. I want to reiterate the board will provide an opportunity for discussion on the laws applicable to equine practice at a future board meeting. However, we've been advised that we cannot entertain this discussion at this time, and although we do not have a date set yet for the equine veterinary practices discussion, we will keep CVMA and all the other stakeholders informed as soon as we do. Now let's move into public comments And since we're in a hybrid situation today for the first time, I'd like to take those here in person first, and then I'll ask the moderator to open it up to those online. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, and as always during the course of the meeting, if it's necessary to accommodate all the speakers, we may need to adjust that time. And now I'd like to open it up. So for those in the room that would like to come up and make public comments, please join us. And please introduce yourself too. Thank you.
Bonnie Lutz. Okay, I don't usually read my comments, but I want to make sure that I get it right, so I'm going to read my comment. So first of all, thank you for letting me make a public comment. My comment is related to the letter from CVMA dated April 1st, 2022, and the issues raised in that letter. It is my understanding that the board has refused to put the issues raised in that letter on the agenda for the April 2022 meetings. I'm disappointed that the board has made that decision for several reasons. My biggest reason is that even though I don't do equine cases, so this is not regarding equine cases, because of insurance reasons, I don't handle equine cases. But a lot of the issues in that letter refer to the interpretation of the VCPR and the qualification of expert witnesses.
Excuse me, Bonnie, could you lower the mic a little
it's
a little louder?
Okay,
Thanks.
sorry. It seems to me that the board is refusing to take the opportunity to address the issue regarding VCPR and the qualification of expert witnesses, and that's disappointing because it also applies to my small animal cases. If these issues are discussed and the board chooses to take the stance that there's no problem with the interpretation of the relevant statutes and regulations or with the qualifications of their expert witnesses, then so be it. At least there will have been a discussion of the issues and the policies behind the interpretation of the Practice Act. I urge you to reconsider your decision to table the issues raised in the April 1st letter and to participate in a meaningful discussion of those issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, board members. Like Ms. Lutz, I too usually prefer to speak more extemporaneously, but I'm going to read my comments as well here today. My name is Dan Baxter, and I'm the Executive Director of the California Veterinary Medical Association. As we stated at your last meeting, there's a significant disconnect between the practice standards observed by equine practitioners in the field and the standards to which those same practitioners are being held by this board. Accordingly, we're requesting that this issue be agendized by the board at a meeting in the very near future. And while I'm definitely heartened to hear that this is going to be agendized at some point, I want to emphasize the need for it to happen very, very quickly. As you know, this item was initially scheduled to be taken up today through a presentation by the CVMA to the board. As an antecedent to that discussion, and at the board's request, we submitted a written analysis of laws that are causing concern in the equine practice community, and we identified a number of areas in which we believe significant progress can be made to help both those practicing equine veterinary medicine and those regulating it. Additionally, the CVMA sought to continue discussions on standards of care, who determines them, how they are interpreted, and how they apply to different practice types. Our voice as consumers and as the licensees who make this board possible have to be heard. As to the cancellation of the CVMA's presentation here today, we note that never before has this board halted ongoing policy discussions due to pending enforcement actions. And we find this development troubling because it threatens the open democratic protocols upon which California's political process relies. Moreover, while the board's decision to cancel our presentation was based on the position that we would risk inappropriately delving into the details of pending disciplinary actions, such is not the case. We have no intention of discussing individual cases, parties, or fact patterns, and to postpone this discussion until the currently pending enforcement cases are concluded overlooks the fact that A, those cases will stretch on for months or years, and B, were this rationale taken to its logical conclusion, the existence of pending cases would preclude open dialogue on nearly all of the rulemaking packages currently in the works at the VMB. We are eager to have thoughtful dialogue with the board on the issues discussed in the materials we submitted on April 1st, and we once again are asking the VMB to honor its role as a public board to hear the voices of the profession by agendizing this topic, and we would ask you to do so at your forthcoming July meeting. You will be sending a message to the profession that you are listening. We can't afford to wait for months or years. We need to act now. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And for those that have, excuse me, written remarks, if you're so inclined, please give us a copy for the staff.
Hi, I'm Donna Fielding, and I'm an equine veterinarian in California. I'm actually the managing partner of about 40 equine veterinarians, so I come kind of representing a larger group. I think I voiced my concerns at the last meeting that we would really like to see this topic that the last two speakers have referred to come up and at least hear the discussion about it and hear how you guys are planning to hopefully recognize the issue and deal with it. I think we were, again, on the private practice end, a little bit stunned that it did not end up on the agenda for today, and we're all looking forward to the discussion and hearing what happened. And so I think we wanted to yet again renew our request that it ends up on the agenda, and as the other speakers have mentioned, hopefully ends up there soon. And again, I think I said this last time, we are not a racetrack practice. None of our our issues do not relate specifically to those. It's really just more equine practice in general and how this is going to work. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning, board members.
Morning.
My name is Dr. Paul Mcclellan. I've been an equine practitioner for 4 decades. I wanted to voice my support for the previous speakers' comments. I'd also like to ask a question of you. You stated that this agenda item, you were advised not to put it on the board, on the agenda. I'd like to understand who is advising the board on that matter and what was the rationale for doing so, if that can be answered.
I'm not sure, Sarah. We're not yeah, we're not. This is, during this period, the public comment not on the agenda is not a dialogue between the board and the public, unfortunately.
Very
but
well.
Thank you for asking.
Well, as an owner of animals, I am a consumer of veterinary services as well, and I hope the board understands that the equine veterinarians feel that their issues and their concerns have not been adequately addressed over the last 4 decades, and it is time to reevaluate the statutes and to reflect the changes that have occurred and make sure that we can continue to protect and care for the horses adequately and in line with all the various things. And so these discussions need to be taken up immediately. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Michael Mano. I've been a licensed equine veterinarian in California for 40 years. I spoke at the last meeting. I was one of the first veterinarians to ask for this topic to be agendized for this meeting. I don't need to rehash any of that, and I'll agree with most of the previous speakers today of what our concerns are. But I'd also like to bring up the point that the license fees for the close to 8,000 veterinarians and registered veterinarian technicians provide the revenue solely for the annual budget of this board. And as one of the fee payers, I am also a stakeholder, as are all of my colleagues. And so I think as a stakeholder, we should all have a voice that is heard. And the fact that the topic was taken off the agenda for this meeting is certainly concerning. And it just goes to weaken the credibility of the board in our eyes if we are told that we can have a discussion and then that discussion is either postponed or not had at all, which at this point we're not sure that's going to happen. You say it is, and we hope that you will stand by that. And I just wish to reiterate all of our concerns and ask you to please have this discussion sooner than later. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to provide comment in the public comment section. I'm John Pascal, Executive Associate Dean of the School of Veterinary Medicine at the University of California, Davis, and I'd just like to support the CVMA's position in this and express our extreme disappointment that despite the fact that this was publicly acknowledged at the last meeting, it would be agendized at this meeting, and that the board would meet with CVMA, that I want to express our disappointment, and also to make you aware that as one of the primary providers of veterinary education in California and training future veterinarians, that this issue is really important to us, and that some of the actions that the board has taken recently are actually diametrically opposed to what we're teaching our students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Steve Boyer. I'm a licensed veterinarian in the state of California for 40 years. I'm here today to comment on two issues of concern. The first relates to a request by the Veterinary Medical Board for interested licensees to apply for a position on the Multidisciplinary Advisory Committee. A colleague of mine, also a licensed California vet for many years, submitted the time-consuming application, which included letters of recommendation obtained from prominent individuals locally and nationally. Never did the Veterinary Medical Board acknowledge receipt of the application as a matter of common courtesy or reply to the applicant regarding status of the application with respect to completeness or whether it was reviewed until after a decision was made on the selection. In my opinion, this obvious lack of appreciation for and woeful lack of communication with licensees whose financial support keeps the board afloat is rude at best and seemingly reflects an attitude of systemic disrespect towards licensees associated with certain types of veterinary practice. My second comment is to voice concern over the executive director of the Veterinary Medical Board blocking a presentation by the California Veterinary Medical Association concerning the nature of mobile equine veterinary practice and how it relates to the current California Veterinary Medical Practice Act. Following the public comment session in the January Veterinary Medical Board meeting, the Veterinary Medical Board President, Kathy Bowler, immediately requested that the CVMA, along with interested stakeholders, prepare a presentation to be placed on the agenda for today's meeting. The CVMA created a simple PowerPoint presentation with 5 clear bullet points, which laid important groundwork for discussion regarding updating the VMPA and VMP enforcement policy, VMB, Veterinary Medical Board enforcement policy. Significant time and energy were spent on developing the input this presentation would provide to the Veterinary Medical Board, only to have it removed as an agenda item just prior to the meeting. Please remember that the CVMA presentation was sincerely requested by President Bowler and agreed to by Director Seiferman during the January Veterinary Medical Board meeting. Again, a lack of appreciation and a suspect attitude towards some licensees is apparent. I ask the Veterinary Medical Board to uphold your mandate to allow all of your licensees to be heard and allow the CVMA to be our voice. It cannot be overstated how Veterinary Medical Board enforcement overreach has resulted in a significant increase in the license fees for all California veterinarians. Tactics which block the CVMA's involvement with updating and fine-tuning the VMPA will likely further increase license fees and dissuade new graduates from a career in equine medicine. Not having sufficient numbers of experience, pardon me?
3 minutes
You
are
just
up.
have a couple more,
Okay.
just finish it up.
Got a couple more sentences.
Yeah, that's
Not having a sufficient number of experienced and well-prepared mobile equine veterinarians will be a tragedy for horses and horse owners going forward and should be of great concern to the Veterinary Medical Board. The CVMA presentation deserves to be an agenda item at the next Veterinary Medical Board meeting because it addresses issues in current law and regulations which can be contrary to horse owners' interests and to the welfare of the horse. So that's it.
Thank you. And thank you for giving us your remarks. Thank you. Anyone else in this room? And if not, I'll turn it over to the moderator for online. Okay. All right, moderator, if you would open up to the callers, that would be terrific.
Thank you, Madam President. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to make a comment, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of the screen and submit it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. And I do see we already have some individuals with raised hands, so I will go to calling user 11. You should be able to unmute yourself.
All right.
All right. So calling user 11, you should be able to unmute yourself. All right, we'll move on to the next one and we'll come back to calling user 11. So next we have, oh, there we go. Calling user 11, you're unmuted.
Hello, I'm Dr. Larry Overly. I practice veterinary medicine for 25 years in California. I, along with all the people there in attendance that have spoken, also believe that the PowerPoint presentation by the CVMA should be allowed at the next meeting. I don't see any reason why there can't be dialogue to basically work through this discourse. I know certain veterinarians are feeling persecuted unfairly based on historically how we have always practiced. And we definitely need clarification in order to move forward to feel like we are doing the appropriate thing as veterinarians. So would you please put it back on the agenda for next time? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Kent McClure. Kent, you should be able to unmute yourself. There you go, you're unmuted.
Members of the board, good morning. My name is Dr. Kent McClure. I'm an Associate Executive Vice President and Chief Advocacy Officer for the American Veterinary Medical Association. We represent about 100,000 veterinarians from across the breadth of the profession, encompassing practices addressing companion animals, food animals, equines, exotic animals, wildlife, research, public health, and more. Each of these practice areas are different, and each has unique aspects and considerations. We have heard from a number of our members and stakeholders regarding the board's enforcement standards directed at equine practitioners. Many are candidly appalled by the board's recent enforcement actions, believing the board does not even understand reasonable standards for equine practice. We believe open dialogue is essential to understanding and resolving such issues. We fully support the California Veterinary Medical Association's desire for the board to place the CVMA presentation and discussion on this issue on the agenda for the next meeting of this board. Postponing such a discussion for potentially years is unacceptable and we believe unnecessary. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Ryan Carpenter. Ryan, you should be able to unmute yourself.
This is Ryan Carpenter. I just want to voice my support for the previous callers.
Oh, she's right here. Thank you.
All right, and next we have Karen Jackman. Karen, you should be able to unmute yourself. And Karen, you should be able to unmute yourself. And you're unmuted.
Jackman, I'm my practitioner for the past 19 years, and I would just like to echo the comments of all the previous commenters. Thank you.
Could we have Karen speak up a little bit more? I don't think anyone in here is hearing it.
Hi, this is Karen Jackman. Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm a 19-year veteran equine practitioner, and I would just like to support the previous comments that have been made by all of the other practitioners and representatives of CVMA and AVMA. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and we have a Mike Perales with a comment. So Mike, hold on a minute. I will find you. And all right, Mike Perales, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Just wanted to comment and in support of all the other presenters this morning. I think it's basically a travesty of what's going on at this point, and we really need to get this matter agendized at the next board meeting or sooner. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and our next request is from Dr. Rick Arthur. So Dr. Arthur, give me a moment. I will find you and you can unmute yourself. All right, Dr. Arthur, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Rick
and
Arthur.
you're unmuted.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. I'm Dr. Rick Arthur. I've been licensed by this board for over 45 years. I practiced exclusively on thoroughbred racehorses for over 30 years, and then 15 years as equine medical director at the UC Davis School of Veterinary Medicine until I retired last summer. The equine medical director is assigned full-time to the California Horse Racing Board. Among other responsibilities, by law, the equine medical director is the primary advisor to the California Horse Racing Board on the practice of veterinary medicine within their enclosures. Prior to becoming equine medical director, I was president of the American Association of Equine Practitioners, where I also served as chairman of the Racing Committee, Racing Council, as well as other numerous AAP committees, including the task force that developed the AAP's clinical guidelines for veterinarians practicing in a parimutuel environment. I published over 50 peer-reviewed articles and book chapters dealing with various topics related to horse racing veterinary medicine, and I've lectured nationally and internationally on the same. Accordingly, my knowledge of racetrack practice is extensive. That is in stark contrast to your staff and your in-house consultants who have none. The fact is, the California Veterinary Medical Board regulations do not acknowledge the very high standard of equine practice procedures in California, and that needs to change. And I totally support the CVMA's comments and the AVMA's comments in this regard. But let me speculate why we haven't seen the CVMA's proposal on this agenda, because I've seen this before. The Deputy Attorney General's handling your cases against the high-profile equine veterinarians your staff targeted was afraid that whatever the CVMA was proposing would further jeopardize your weak cases. I'm truly surprised the Department of Consumer Affairs and Business, Consumer and Services and Housing Agency haven't stepped in already. Or have they? Do you know? If they haven't, shame on Secretary Castro Ramirez and DCA Director Kirchmeier and Governor Newsom for that matter. Every board thinks they have to defend their staff no matter how egregious the screw up. That's state government. But in this case, defending your staff will only further embarrass this board. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, the next comment is from Jennifer Hawkins. Jennifer, give me a moment. I will find you. All right, Jennifer, you should be able to unmute yourself. And Jennifer, you're unmuted.
Can you hear me? Good morning.
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, members of the board. Thank you for taking my comment this morning. I'm Dr. Jennifer Hawkins. I am the Executive Director of the Southern California Veterinary Medical Association. In my 22 years of veterinary practice as a small animal practitioner and a shelter veterinarian, it's been my observation that cases reviewed by the Veterinary Medical Board are often scrutinized by subject matter experts that sometimes lack expertise in the areas that they are reviewing. The veterinary profession is already in crisis. Knowledge that the Veterinary Medical Board may issue disciplinary action based on an interpretation by an expert that is not knowledgeable in an area of practice only promotes fear of practicing in the state and risks creating more barriers to pet owners seeking veterinary care. I would also like to ask for open dialogue between the Veterinary Medical Board and the CVMA on this issue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, and our next comment is from Nick Huggins. Nick, you should be able to unmute yourself. There you go.
My name is Nick Huggins, owner of a referral hospital in Southern California. Been an equine practitioner for coming up 20 years. I'm with multiple associates who are all in full support and agreement of the other practitioner statements, the AAP support, AVMA support, and CVMA support. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
And our next request for comment is from David Foley. David, you should be able to unmute yourself. There you go.
My name is David Foley. I'm the Executive Director of the American Association of Equine Practitioners, and I represent 9,000 equine veterinarians in the U.S., Canada, and in 65 countries around the world. We have 600 members and license holders who reside in the state of California, caring for nearly 700,000 horses in your state. We, like the CVMA and the AVMA, are very concerned by the board's recent enforcement actions, and we would encourage more dialogue with the CVMA to better understand the nuances of equine or large animal practice. To not do so will have strong implications on someone's ability to effectively practice in California or their desire to do so, and could have long-term negative effects on the welfare of California's horse population. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and our next request for comment is from Brad Jackson. And Brad Jackman, you should be able to unmute yourself. Brad, you're unmuted. This is the moderator, and Brad Jackman, you are unmuted, but we are not hearing you. Okay, so I think he was having difficulty with his audio. He did, however, type out his comment in the Q&A panel. Would you like me to just go ahead and read what he typed?
Yes, please.
Okay, Brad Jackman typed, I have been an equine practitioner for nearly 40 years and want to stress the need for the issues that have been brought forth to the board be addressed as expediently as possible. I am greatly disappointed that the board chose to remove this from the agenda unilaterally and at last minute. As veterinarians, it is our fees that support this board, and the current lack of action will negatively impact our ability to continue to practice and recruit equine veterinarians to California. And that is the last request for comment I have in the Q&A. I'll give one more look to our attendees, and that is we have a request for comment from Barry Grant. Barry, you should be able to unmute yourself. So Barry Grant, you should have the opportunity to unmute yourself. All right, Barry will come back to you. Meanwhile, we'll go to Yana Sarukers. Yana, you should be able to unmute yourself. There you go, you're unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Yana Sorikers. I'm an associate veterinarian at Petaluma Equine, and I'm speaking on behalf of our practice of 5 veterinarians. We just want to offer our support for the comments made earlier by the AVMA, the CVMA, and the other equine practitioners about the statement put out by the CVMA for improving our representation with the Veterinary Medical Board, and that we don't believe that the discussion, the dialogue that was proposed by the CVMA would have any significant effect on currently reviewed cases. And we would definitely like to see that dialogue happening soon with the Veterinary Medical Board, the CVMA, and taking into account the lack of representation on the board.
Thank you.
All right. And then Barry Grant, you should be seeing a button that pops up telling you that you can unmute yourself. And Barry, if you're unable to unmute yourself, you can type. Oh, there you go. You're unmuted.
Down?
Yes.
It is a special thing. It's hard for old people to use all the modern technology, but I've been licensed by the state of California for 55 years. I've practiced private practice. I've been a full professor at universities and a regulatory veterinarian, and I have my own practice. Now, I'm in full agreement with all the other speakers who spoke eloquently and with great respect. I'm wondering, is there not a possibility of having a special meeting? This is a very complex topic that needs to get settled soon rather than later. And maybe there's some legislative rule that doesn't allow us, but it seemed like a 30-day notice would be fine to have a special meeting. You can see the interest in this, and it's extremely important nationwide and internationally. We need to be able to encourage younger people to want to come into equine practice, and that's not the case. We will not be taking good care of the horses in this state. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
All right. And we have a request for comment from Jeff Hall. Jeff, you should be able to unmute yourself. There you go. You're unmuted.
Hello, this is Dr. Jeff Hall, equine practitioner and also the president of the California Midcoast Veterinary Medical Association. I'd just like to go on record in support of the previous speakers in expediting getting this very critical topic on the agenda in the very near future to have an open dialogue to find solutions that are needed for equine practitioners in the state of California. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator, and I see no further requests for public comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
Thank you. And I'll just check with the audience here again, just to make sure nobody has any more public comment before we close this item. All right, thank you very much. Excuse me, I'm sorry, a little allergies situation here. The next item on the agenda is the review of the minutes for the January meeting. And I would look to the members to see, I myself did not find any typos or mistakes. They were, again, the way you're doing the minutes is very well done, staff. But I will look to the board to see if anyone else found any issues. Oh, Jennifer.
On page 26, Article 2, Purpose Item I, the third sentence, I wasn't really sure what it meant, but it said, since the board approved the legislative proposal that was in the Sunset Bill to also accept the 4 trained veterinary technicians and the PACE program, I'm sure PACE meant PAVE, but I wasn't sure what it meant by the 4 trained veterinary technicians. I was confused by that, but I'm confident that PACE was supposed to be PAVE.
Yes. Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you. Good catch. And only you would catch that, because I did not. Anyone else? Then I'd like a motion to adopt with this amendment.
Motion to adopt.
Any seconds? Huh?
As amended.
As amended, yeah.
I'll second.
Thank you, Jennifer.
As amended.
As amended, okay. And now, let's move to public comment on this item on the minutes. And moderator, I don't see anyone hands in this room, so you might open up to the online.
Thank you, Madam President. I've opened up the Q&A panel. Again, if any member of the public would like to comment on agenda item 3, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. We'll give you a moment. All right, I see no request for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The next, and I don't know, do we have Consumer Affairs here?
Yes.
Oh, we haven't voted. That's true. Sorry. To adopt the minutes as amended. Jessica?
Dr. Bradbury?
Thank you.
Yes. Ms. Laredo? Yes. Dr. Noland? Yes. Dr. Nunez?
Yes.
Dr. Solocito?
Yes.
Ms. Bowler?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Minor detail, the vote. Thank you. So the next item is a report and an update from the Department of Consumer Affairs. I'm not sure who's presenting. Thank you very much.
All right. I want to make sure Mike can, okay. All right. Thank you.
I think you may need to move the mic a little closer.
All right. How's this? All right. Well, good morning, board members. I'm Brianna Miller with the Department of Consumer Affairs, Board and Bureau Relations. Thank you for allowing me an opportunity to provide an update to your board today. I'd like to start my update with a note about the transition back to in-person meetings. As you know, because here we are today, on April 1st, DCA's boards and bureaus returned to meeting in accordance with all aspects of the Open Meeting Act, including publicly noticing all meeting locations. Legislation is in progress, which would permanently allow boards to meet remotely, while also providing both virtual and physical options for members of the public to participate. If legislation, and that legislation is AB 1733, is passed by the legislature and signed by the governor, it would take place immediately. We cannot be certain that AB 1733 will be enacted or when, but I know that we all appreciate the flexibility and increased access that comes with both in-person and remote meeting options. Recently, Board and Bureau Relations distributed to all board and committee members guidelines and requirements to adhere to when conducting in-person meetings. In sum, this communication addresses requirements for meetings under the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act, making sure you adhere to local public health guidelines at a meeting location, face coverings, and vaccination verification and testing. DCA has also shared guidance and tips from the California Health and Human Services Agency to reduce the spread of COVID-19 for in-person meetings. If you have not already done so, I encourage you all to review these documents. Additionally, as you're preparing for your upcoming meetings, please do not hesitate to reach out to Board and Bureau Relations with questions. Next, I'll discuss COVID-19 safety measures. DCA appreciates all board members and staff who have continued to serve through a pandemic that still affects all of us in so many ways. State public health guidance has relaxed mandatory face coverings, but masks are still strongly encouraged for indoor settings. And in high-risk settings, such as healthcare facilities, face coverings are required for everyone regardless of vaccination status. Local orders may be more restrictive to respond to community conditions, so please be aware of changing public health guidance and remember that as state representative, we are all expected to adhere to state and local orders when carrying out our duties. Next, a note about appointments and recruitment. Currently, the board has one vacancy, a public member appointed by the Senate Rules Committee. Additionally, the board has some members who are either in your grace period or will be entering your grace period soon. Board and Bureau Relations is here to assist your board with the reappointment process, and likewise, as it pertains to vacancies, DCA's communications team recently released a new communications toolkit to assist boards with member recruitment, and that toolkit is available in multiple languages. Board members can also encourage individuals to visit the Board Member Resources Center located on DCA's website to apply for an appointment. Next, I'll transition to some departmental news, starting first with the Enlightened Licensing Project. This work group was formed in 2020 and is comprised of Executive Officer Sieferman and the Executive Officer of the Board of Barbarian Cosmetology, and they serve as subject matter experts for the entire DCA. The purpose of the Enlightened Licensing Project is to help make individual boards and bureaus streamline and make their licensing processes more effective and efficient by utilizing best practices, information technology, and cost-saving measures. The first deep dive, which was done for the Board of Registered Nursing, has completed. The report contains recommendations that can be used by all boards and bureaus to improve their processes, and we expect that it will be shared across DCA quite soon. After this successful first round, the work group will soon begin assisting another border bureau. Moving on to key positions filled at DCA. As DCA looks toward the future, Director Kirkmeyer continues to build the DCA team to lead the department toward continual improvement and excellent service. Tanya Corcoran began serving as the department's first Compliance and Equity Officer effective March 2nd. Ms. Corcoran will oversee DCA's Solid Training and Planning Solutions, the Organizational Improvement Office, Equal Employment Opportunity Office, and the Internal Audits Office, allowing DCA to better identify and analyze emerging issues department-wide and provide timely solutions to our divisions, boards, and bureaus. Additionally, Terrence Brass joined DCA as the Chief of the Division of Investigation, or DFI, effective March 28th. Mr. Brass brings valuable experience in all major aspects of law enforcement and has served in the United States Marine Corps. As the DFI Chief, Mr. Brass will lead the team responsible for providing investigative services to DCA's boards and bureau with the mission to protect and serve California's consumers. And last but not least, Dong Prahadi was selected to serve as the department's Internal Audits Chief, also effective March 28th. As the Internal Audits Chief, Mr. Prahadi will lead audit efforts to provide independent consulting services designed to add value and improve in department operations. Next, I'd like to share a bit about the Board and Bureau Relations newsletter. So this is another communication that you may have recently received from Board and Bureau Relations, and that's our quarterly newsletter. I am pleased to announce that on April 5th, we distributed the first iteration of this quarterly newsletter titled Board Members, Did You Know?, to all of our board and committee members. This newsletter is an outreach tool to keep you informed of various departmental activities, as well as information which may be impactful to you as a board member. We hope this is something you will find helpful, and we welcome your feedback for future distributions. And if you did not receive the newsletter, please let me know so that we can verify that we have your correct email address. And finally, I'm saddened to report that Carrie Holmes, the Deputy Director of Board and Bureau Relations, will be leaving the Department of Consumer Affairs. Her last day will be May 13th. Deputy Director Holmes joined DCA in 2020 and has since dedicated her efforts to ensuring that Board and Bureau Relations provides the highest level of support and service to our boards and bureaus. As Deputy Director Holmes and I are a two-person team in Board and Bureau Relations, I can personally attest that it has been a joy to work with her, and she will surely be missed. During this transitional period, Board and Bureau Relations will continue to ensure continuity of services to all of our boards and bureaus. And that concludes my presentation. As always, Board and Bureau Relations is here to help your board, and if there's anything we can do to assist you, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you all.
I'd also like to bring up Tracy Montez from DCA.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Dr. Tracy Montez with the Department of Consumer Affairs. I'm part of the executive team, and I'm here today to talk about the Superior Accomplishment Award. The Department of Consumer Affairs issues Superior Accomplishment Awards every April or May. This program is adapted from the California Department of Human Resources Merit Award Program. And each year, nominations are accepted by our boards and bureaus and our programs here at the department. They are reviewed by a merit board that consists of board and bureau representatives at the executive level as well as internally with DCA. Those nominations are critically reviewed to ensure that they represent job performance that is exceptional, that contributes to not only state government, but as well as improving operations here at DCA at our respective boards and bureaus. And so they're given out at a silver level, which is a certificate of recognition, and a $250 stipend, as well as the director then takes one of those recipients and elevates it to a gold award, which is a $500 stipend and a certificate of recognition. I am very happy to present a silver award certificate to Mr. Dan Strike, who I believe is in the audience. Let me tell you a little bit about Dan and his nomination. In December, Dan took the position of one of the enforcement analysts. As you know, your board has had an increase in enforcement complaints, which has been very common across many of our boards. But Dan took on this position and was assigned some very complex case loads. As you know, your board has some pretty significant enforcement actions as you deal with patient harm and patient death. So they can be very complex as compared to, again, some of our other programs. Dan consistently maintained a positive attitude, never had a negative word to say about any of his cases, his staff, his team members. He came to work every day very eager to take on the new challenges. He had a significant percentage of cases closed, worked very hard, never turned down a more complex case or a request to expedite or pay, some extra attention to certain cases in order to assist his teammates. Specifically, Dan or Mr. Strike, I should say, is the epitome of a team player, making himself available to answer any questions from his colleagues, which can often take time away from his duties. He offered and conducted trainings and demonstrations on enforcement processes. He volunteered to jump in with other cases, and he took great pride and continues to take great pride in what he does. If he does make a mistake, he treats it as a learning opportunity and appreciates constructive feedback. And as his enforcement manager noted, he is not only the epitome of an ideal staff member from a manager's perspective, but from the perspective of colleagues, licensees, and consumers. His work ethic, drive, attitude, integrity, and service exemplifies what DCA wants and needs. So congratulations to Mr. Strike and to your board. Again, this is really exciting and exceptional. We have a certificate for Dan, and he will also be featured in the department's Did You Know newsletter and also on social media during Public Employee Recognition Week, which is the first week of May. So hopefully we can all give Dan a round of congratulations. I've had the opportunity of working with Dan in various capacities, so this makes my heart feel very good. I'm also hoping that we can get a picture at some point, Jessica, if you would, with your board members, because we'd like to have this part of social media. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, and congratulations, Dan. Do any board members have questions? Yes.
I just wanted to clarify the purpose of the enlightened licensing project is to streamline the licensing of applicants. Is that correct?
Well, we have our SME here. If Jessica, you'd like to take this one.
Yeah, so we look at various licensing processes through different boards, and we started with Board of Registered Nursing. And what we did is we had them demo a few of their application processes, and we did it with all of DCA SMEs, their licensing experts, to provide feedback and constructive criticism and ask questions so they can all learn from each other and best practices. But the whole intent is to help improve the licensing process overall.
And it started with the nursing board?
It did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there going to be other areas like in the enforcement process or?
Yeah, the director is looking at expanding it to doing licensing and enforcement as well.
Okay.
And as stated, we're hoping that, while the deep dive would be in one board, it's something that all of DCA boards and bureaus can take on and absorb to improve their own processes as well.
Okay.
Any other members have any questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I want to say we're sorry to see Carrie go. She's a terrific staff person, and she was always very helpful to our board and instructive. And so thank you. And thank you for your report today.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Oh, Dr. Nunez.
I also have one more comment.
Oh, yes.
Since this is my grace period, I want you to figure out a way to get me on a Superior Accomplishment Award.
Okay. With epaulets?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'll work on that this afternoon. All right. Now we're, now to agenda item number 5. Oh, I'm sorry. Public comment on the DCA report. I apologize. Anyone in the room? Don't see any. All right. Moderator, could you check with anyone online?
Thank you, Madam Board President. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment on agenda item 4, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand or display instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, I'm seeing no requests for comment. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right. I apologize for missing that. Now to, item number 5, which is the report from the Multidisciplinary Committee, Dr. Sullivan.
Thank you. It is great to see everybody in person again. We had a very good meeting yesterday, covered a lot of topics. So the way that I'm going to approach the presentation today is that on those items that we are going to be referring action items to the board, you'll be getting all of that information for your next meeting. So I'm not going to go into great detail as to the changes in verbiage or the actual issues, but just an overview. And so I would, and then also at the end, I'd like you to ask any questions that you have rather than each step of the way. So if that's okay. We had a very productive meeting yesterday with a lot of good contributions from the public. The meeting was called to order at 9:40. We had a few technical issues. Unfortunately, Dr. Sequoia was able to get to the public side and the meeting got underway. We received comments from the public on items not on the agenda, and those comments were related to the RVT alternate pathway issues and were referred to a subcommittee that is addressing that issue. The January 18th MDC minutes were approved as presented. Agenda item number 5 related to RVT tasks. The agenda item was in response to a request from CARVTA to allow RVTs to charge for animal care service tasks for clients outside a clinic setting. and now they can only be done legally if they are not charging for those services. An example would be where the client who has a VCPR with a veterinarian and an RVT who does not work for that veterinarian that has the VCPR goes to the client's home and gives sub-Q fluids or treats a diabetic patient when the owner is on vacation. When we researched this issue, it was clear that we would be unable to increase the scope of practice of the RVT by regulations. It would require a change in statute. The other difficulty with this issue is that the Veterinary Medical Board cannot propose legislations that changes the scope of practice. That may be done only by an outside organization or association. We also discussed the item as an access to care issue. We are working with other stakeholders looking at ways of increasing RVT tasks within the clinic setting. And the subcommittee also explored the idea of a mid-level practitioners, which you will see mentioned in many trade journals. The program that is ongoing right now is at Lincoln Memorial in Tennessee, Lincoln Memorial University in Tennessee, and it does not seem like a reasonable pathway at this time. So there was no action taken on this issue yet, but we will continue to work and keep you apprised of our work. Action item 6 was a report on action regarding RVT education programs. This subcommittee is finding that it is a huge task which is involving many different accrediting agencies. AVMA's Committee on Veterinary Technicians Education Activities has 11 standards that it evaluates and accredits and accreditations, and does accredit 23 schools in California. Other agencies that have oversight are the Bureau of Private Post-Secondary Education and Accrediting, and Accrediting Commission for Community and Junior Colleges. The latter two programs are not as complete as the CVTEA's program. The one conclusion from the subcommittee was that the AVMA accredited program, it seems that applicants should not have to go through the approval process of the Veterinary Medical Board because the AVMA program is very complete. However, they have not made that recommendation at this point. This is an ongoing project that will take more time and a lot more work, and we will continue to report on their progress. Action item 7 was a response to Dr. Pollard's request to look at updating the cannabis guidelines because of the changes in the law that was passed and signed by the governor last year, AB 45, that allows hemp CBD products to be added to pet foods. We also looked at AB 1885 that is in the legislature this year. The subcommittee's recommendation and the committees voted to not update the board's cannabis guidelines because hemp CBD is an over-the-counter product, and we felt that there should not be any guidelines for that, that it should be handled as any other over-the-counter product is handled. As for AB 1885, it has not passed the legislature yet, and if it does, we have until January 1st, 2024 to amend the guidelines. Action item number 8 addresses several issues. The first was the 6th question on our frequently asked questions regarding the VCPR on the board's website. And that has to do with requiring a VCPR to administer vaccinations. The second issue is that at the present time, rabies vaccinations are considered a dangerous drug and therefore require VCPR done prior to the vaccination. We have been doing state-mandated public health vaccination clinics throughout the state for over 50 years. And in those cases, it would be impossible to complete a large clinic and do a VCPR exam on every patient. Therefore, we are recommending a change in the VCPR to exempt rabies vaccines requiring a VCPR before a vaccination, and that would be in Regulation 2032.1. The third issue is to clarify the intent of 2030.3 minimum standards animal vaccination locations. We are proposing amendments or adding language to sections B, Q, and R in that section. With an introduction by Dr. Grant Miller, I did talk to Dr. Fritz and Dr. Campagna from the rabies section of the California Public Health Department, and they said that the verbiage that we are recommending to change is fine with their department. The MDC agreed, and the subcommittee agreed with the subcommittee and moved and passed 2 motions to send these changes to the board, and you'll be seeing that in your next meeting. They are somewhat involved and do require some background, all of which you'll be getting next meeting, so I'm not going to cover that today. Action item number 9 had a lot of discussion and deals with compounding in a clinical setting. The discussion dealt with both the regulations themselves and the education material that we are developing to help licensees understand what they are required to do to comply. This is even more difficult because now we are requiring documentation of very basic procedures that licensees have been doing forever. But we need to do that in order to be able to continue to do in-clinic compounding. To address some of the urgent issues, we may need to amend the enabling statute that allows veterinarians to do compounding in a clinical setting, and we need to address new regulations that fills the gaps that we need for a paper trail from the description of the formula to the compounded preparation end user, which is either office stock or dispensing the preparation to a client. We also need to make an exemption for IV fluids in the compounding regulations because of the paperwork that it entails in an emergency case or a critical care case, which is unnecessary because this information will be in the patient's medical record. Since the law is in effect as of April 1st, the committee decided that we would move forward with what was developed while continuing to make the necessary changes that I have mentioned, and we'll be working closely with the stakeholders to do this. You will also be receiving this information in detail for your next meeting for consideration. Item number 10 was an update by Dr. Bradbury from the Complaint Processing Audit Subcommittee. She talked about the expert witness training that occurred on March 28th this year. In this training, the subcommittee, along with staff and Deputy Attorney General personnel, helped create veterinary-specific training for the board expert witnesses as opposed to using the program from the medical board. The training was well received by the participants and ran 30 minutes over because of the interest and the participation of the attending people. Because of the great feedback, the subcommittee and staff are going to continue with providing veterinary-specific cases and having roundtable discussions on active cases. Case reviews are still on hold as staff is catching up on old cases, but should be back in the next few months. The subcommittee is still in the process of developing a resource reference list to add to the expert training manual. There was a request from the public to make this available to the public, this list. The subcommittee will also be reviewing and possibly updating the board's current expert witness criteria. There was no action requested from this subcommittee. The final agenda item 11 was presented by Jessica as an update on MDC's assignments, their estimated meeting schedules, and the subcommittee members. We then adjourned the meeting. Are there any questions?
Dr. Bradbury.
I just wanted to clarify that for the roundtable discussions, we're not going to be, they won't be including board members and subcommittee members, as we're not allowed to hear about active cases. Thanks.
I had just a couple of questions and comments, and thank you, Dr. excuse me, Sullivan, and thanks to the MDC for all their really hard work. Gosh. But I'm concerned because on the compounding one particularly, I learned a lot, and I'm only a public member here, so the vets obviously know what is going on. But the law taking effect in April worries me for our practitioners because it does seem like the law has problems with it, and certainly in the practice of veterinary medicine. And I know we'll be discussing this more in July, but I'm wondering, and maybe this is for CVMA or something, if there are plans to, go to the legislature for some sort of relief on this, because some of the practices I heard yesterday and some of the descriptions in the law would be really problematic, it seems like, for vets ongoing in their normal practice. So I just wondered, I don't think there's anything the board can do right now, but I just wanted to ask.
Yeah. I don't know if there's any other avenue. If there are avenues, we would definitely like to listen to that if there are, either from CVMA or from your access to the legislature. We can always lean on that too if there's some avenue that you know of. It is problematic, but a bigger problem is that if we don't act and did not do this,
right,
then the law that is on the books states that the U.S. Pharmacopoeia guidelines, which includes veterinarians and veterinary clinics, would be adopted as statute by the state of California as soon as they're approved. So I am hopeful that we can make these changes fairly soon, but nothing moves that fast through legislation and regulation. And obviously, the staff is very aware of our concerns and our issues with implementing this. So we've got to move forward as quickly as we can. And any suggestions from any stakeholders or any individuals or legislators would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you. And I also thought it was very important, the work done on the VCPR rabies changes for rabies clinics, because they happen all the time.
Yeah.
And they're critically necessary. So any other questions? Dr. Nunez.
Yeah, I had a comment on just about everything you said. So, but I don't expect to hash out any solutions to these complicated issues. That's why we're fortunate to have the MDC, because we let you all do that. But on the issue with RVT task, it's clear that an RVT can do certain tasks under the indirect supervision of a veterinarian, but this complicates the matter because instead of the veterinarian getting paid, we're asking for the RVT to get paid to do that. So the short-term solution, I suppose, would be to have the client pay the DVM and then the DVM pay the RVT. That's the short-term solution.
No, that wouldn't work, because in the case that we're talking about, the RVT is not an employee of the veterinarian that has the VCPR. So
right.
It's an independent.
Right.
Out of.
But there's not, if an RVT wants to do that right away before we figure it out, they can say you have to pay the doctor, and then he'll reimburse me.
Well, I can't comment on that. I don't know.
Just if anyone's listening that they want to do it, that's how you would do it legally right now. But I guess it would be some things to consider would be recourse if a doctor gave an order to do something and it wasn't done correctly. If the RVT is being paid, and the recourse would be on them. Are those the legislative fix that you're referring to that would need to be hashed out?
Yeah, we had looked at language and doing it through regulations, and we had very specific requirements in that the RVT would not be able to bring any medications or of their own, would not be able to make any decisions on their own. They would be strictly following the prescription that the veterinarian has sent to with the client.
And if they did not, then the discipline would be on them?
Yeah, it would affect their license, correct. And we would assume that, you know, whatever legislation is drawn up would have similar guide rails.
And how would inspections be handled? They wouldn't be able to do any inspections on whether or not they're using clean needles or anything like that?
Well, there definitely would be inspection if there was a client complaint.
It would just be complaint driven.
Yeah. Whether and it's, you know, it's up to a future decision whether that you know, as an independent entity, whether they would be required to have a premises permit or not. And I mean, that
they would be required to have name tags and proper licensing displays and things like that.
Yes.
Okay.
That would be handled with regulations rather than statute.
Okay. In regards to the accreditation, RVT education, that was in response to a conversational issue that Nancy started about the need for California accrediting RVT programs, since AVMA was already doing a pretty good job at it. But it didn't quite cover the alternate paths that were happening. And I want to emphasize the importance of those alternate paths and my support of them, because RVT students are not similar to DVM students. A lot of them have to get their education in addition to working numerous jobs and so forth. So it's important for us to have that avenue for RVTs to receive their education and good work on that. The VCPR for rabies, I think that's a really good outreach point, because I think that's a really common misconception on licensees, that the common belief is only a veterinarian can give a rabies vaccine, and that's not entirely true. So that's just a thought I had to include in an outreach memo on who can give a rabies vaccination under what circumstances, because I'm constantly telling people that not just an DVM can give a rabies vaccine. I don't know where that came from. And then the compounding issue. The presentation that was given at the MDC yesterday, I think there was a question on, do we move forward with the recommendations? Are you going to present those recommendations right now? Should I hold off until you present those?
No. So that material will be coming to you at your next meeting, and you'll decide if it goes forward or not.
Okay.
So it was an action item that we're forwarding to you with the recommendation to move forward with it, to get information out to licensees, even though it's, you know, not perfect by any means.
Okay, so I won't spend too much time on that. I'll just clarify the imperfections that I see on them. It would be helpful to have a clear definition of what is a sterile versus a non-sterile compounding product, because I think that would be confusing as it was presented. And you also said that compounding does not have to be in the policy manual, and if hospital's policy manual?
Yes, well, it's a policy manual related to compounding.
Right. So
if it's a compounded preparation that is not done very frequently, you can put all of that information that's required in the medical record. You don't have to have it in the formula manual.
The question I had was, if it's not in the policy manual, how are hospital inspectors going to enforce proper compounding, since a lot of compounding products are made and dispensed? And if an inspector isn't there at the precise time that happened, and it's not in the policy manual, how would it be enforced?
Well, I would assume that if there's a complaint-driven inspection, then they'd be looking at the medical records and seeing if that compounded preparation was recorded properly. The idea on this is whenever we're compounding, we want a paper trail. If the paper trail is in the medical record, then it doesn't have to be in the compounding policies manual. Okay, so it's to make it as efficient as possible. If you're compounding a product, 2-3 times a month, then it's more efficient to have a formula and then have how the ingredients, the identification of the ingredients in that process is a lot easier to do on a spreadsheet than to put it in every medical record unless you decide that's how you want to comply.
Well, I think it would be easier for the practitioner if it was required to be in the policy manual instead of every single time I have to dispense this compounded product, I'm going to have to write down the full formula in the medical record. Whereas if I'm doing it a lot, then I can just have them refer back to the policy manual on how you're going to compound this.
I don't think there is a given requirement to do it one way or the other. If you want to put all of your compounded preparations in the medical record, if you have, you have a computer system and you just want to flag that and put it in the medical record every time, I don't think there's a problem. The inspection is to see that there is, that it's documented. Well, you had paper trail.
You had those forms about. I think so. I think a red flag's just been raised.
No, I was just going to clarify because this is all part of his report. But the regulation itself says the formula document may be included in the policies and procedure manual maintained pursuant to subsection A. If the compounded drug preparation is not routinely compounded, a formula record for the preparation may be kept in the medical record of the patient. So everything that Dr. Sullivan and the subcommittee did in that guidance document is supported by either the regulation or statute. So it's not that they had created these separate policies, that they pulled it from the existing law.
Okay. I mean, I like those forms that you showed that actually gave the formula on how to make something. Because there's more than one way to make a compounded product from hospital to hospital, and even varies from doctor to doctor. So I can see the reason why you would say that it doesn't necessarily need to be in the hospital policy manual, but if you ask,
if there's a variation from one doctor to another, that has to be in the formula, and separate formulas for that. So the second step that we haven't done so far is another spreadsheet that takes it from the formula to the end user.
Okay.
And we did not capture that in the regulations yet, and we will.
Well, I guess we don't need to hash it out, but just include that in your discussion on enforcement and variations and what would not necessarily be easy for us, but also for the licensee, because they're under a lot of stress these days with a lot of issues.
Yes. We know what we have to correct.
I think Tara was about to say, we just need to make sure this is, Dr. Sullivan is giving us this report, but it's not agendized, the materials in the report, particularly this meeting. It will be next meeting.
But they do look for directions from us on how to proceed.
I would just say that you're going to be looking at these guidelines at the next meeting, and that would be a really excellent opportunity to take a look at the specific regulations, which are not currently in your book. So if we can take a look at that, and potentially at that time you can identify if there are additional concerns with the regulations themselves, but then also separately look at the drug compounding guidelines that the MDC is proposing that the board post and provide to practitioners. So we can get into more nitty-gritty with respect to what the potential gaps are with the regulations and provide additional guidance to the MDC at that time.
Yeah, I would hope that we don't use the word guidelines. I think what we're trying to do is give examples how licensees can comply with this information, with the educational material going out.
One final question. Since this is in effect already, and we do receive a complaint regarding the specific issues and we don't have this language in place, how is that going to be? Are we going to have them comply with what we've been talking about right now, or how is that going to be addressed?
They would be complying with what's written in the law right now.
Not what we're talking about here, because it hasn't been adopted. They don't have to have these formulary sheets and things like that.
What we're presenting is information to the licensees as to how to comply.
Yep.
We're proposing an informational background as to why we're here having to do this, and then some examples on how to comply.
With those examples, we're just merely providing some courtesy forms. They're not new specific requirements to use these forms because those were never adopted with the regulations, but we are saying that, okay, so this is what the regulations say, and here's a way for you to comply. Here's a courtesy form you could use. So, yeah, I mean, I just want to make sure that it's clear the forms themselves are not the requirement.
Right.
It's just a way to for practitioners to comply with the new regulation.
So we don't just discipline, we actually try to help people to comply.
To help facilitate compliance.
That's our main goal.
Absolutely.
Dr. Nolan. Thank you very much, Dr. Sullivan. I wanted to go back and support Dr. Nunez's comment about the alternative pathway to licensure for RVTs. And I've had experiences in the last couple of years that made me really believe that we need to maintain that alternative route, and we need to be very careful about requiring all of their hours prior to them starting coursework, because a lot of these people are trying to survive and live on their salaries, and they're very, very passionate about pursuing this as a career, but they need to start taking the classes while they're still working. And I know initially, I remember way back in the hinterland years, you know, we were looking at this alternative pathway for those that have been in practice for many years, that really, you know, had paid their dues, and we wanted to encourage them to become RVTs. But I think the world has changed, and I think there are a lot of young people that are passionate about it, but maybe haven't had multiple years of experience. So I just would like to really go on record to say I would support the idea of making it possible for students that have some experience to start their schoolwork. And a lot of these programs the schoolwork is part-time and nights, and so they can earn their living while they're going through their school program.
Yes, and the subcommittee is made up of 2 RVTs. So, and that was also a comment made by a public member yesterday. So that has been referred to that subcommittee.
Thank you. Jennifer.
I just wanted to respond to that because I'm half of the subcommittee. I agree with you, and I will say that there is a lot of research. That's one of the reasons we did need to do some more homework. The alternate route was never intended to be a shortcut to becoming an RVT. It was intended for veterinary assistants who had been in the field and did have those hands-on skills. So while I agree, and I know that we are not trying to regulate ourselves out of a staff shortage, we have to be careful that we don't lower the standards and that we don't compromise consumer protection and also the educational aspect of that. But that's one of the many things we have on our list to research.
You know, and I agree with that statement, but I do think that there is moderation is the key here.
Absolutely. I do agree with your comment that the world has changed, and unfortunately regulations take a lot longer to catch up, but we are working on it.
Thank you. Dr. Salcedo.
Yes. I actually wanted to make a question regarding the subject matter expert training. Is it on? It was okay, sorry. Yeah, so with regards to the subject matter experts, I'm just wondering how we're doing like the recruitment, making sure that all the areas of practice is being considered, and so that we would be able to really establish reasonable practices. So I just wanted to know if that is something that we are including in the criteria. And also, I just wanted to ask, how are we going about recruiting and broadening our, our recruitment to the different areas of practice?
So those are really good questions. And the recruitment, I don't have a specific answer for, so I'll let maybe Jessica talk about that. But I would just say here and now, and it's particularly to the group that's here in front of us, we're always looking for expert witnesses, and we need good people. So please apply. We're looking at the criteria that are put in place right now, and that is something Dr. Sequoia and I are going to go through and then present at the MDC meeting in July. So that's kind of top of our list. So we're looking at the current criteria and going to try and update that if needed. The second part of your question about the various types of expert witnesses, I think that was relating to. So right now, as a case comes in, my understanding is that they are, when the expert witnesses will list what their experiences are, and the cases go specifically to people who have experience in that arena. If there is a case that comes in that there isn't somebody that we have that experience in, we actually go out and look for specific experts and recruit. And so that's happened. An avian case would be an example for that. In our expert witness training, we did touch on that subject as well, because it is important that the experts understand that despite the fact that they may have checked a box on a form, if they get a case and this is out of their wheelhouse, they need to send it back. And the experts that we talked to during that training seem to already understand that, but we did reiterate that. So as to recruitment, maybe Jessica, you can speak to that a little bit.
Well, you kind of touched on it. We are always recruiting. It's available on our website. We send out email blasts too when we're recruiting, but we always encourage more subject matter experts to apply.
Follow-up question. Do we consider the load of cases that the experts handle?
I think there's something off with your mic, or maybe.
Yeah, like I just wanted to know if the load of cases per expert is being considered. You know.
We do. We always ask them their workload, and if they have too many, or if we feel it could be more evenly distributed with the experts that have that experience, and that's what we do. And sometimes if the subject matter expert doesn't have enough or adequate time to review a case, even if it's a very low caseload, we won't send it to that expert, or they'll tell us and they'll send it back.
So I just also wanted to kind of explain, you know, I think we have a hard time recruiting experts because it's always thought of as, you know, it's against your colleagues, but it really is to be somebody that is looking at cases to protect the public, which would also be protecting good veterinarians, you know, that the cases are coming through. So I would like that stigma to go away for the expert witnesses, because we just need good experts that can basically look at a case and establish a standard of care. And that's really what we're interested in when we're looking at our expert witness program. So again, I encourage people to participate in that program, and we're really trying to make it just to keep improving on it and figure out anything we can do to move forward in a better way.
Any other members, questions for Dr. Sullivan before I open it to, should I take a motion to accept the report and then open it to public comment? We don't even need a motion, okay, just wanted to make sure. And no public comment? Yes. You confused me. Yeah, so Dr. Sullivan. So I would like to open it up to anyone, particularly in this room, for public comment on the MDC report.
Grant Miller, CVMA, and I apologize for not being able to be at the MDC meeting yesterday or to connect with Dick ahead of time. Two comments. One, I'll start with the drug compounding. So the CVMA sponsored the legislation to enable veterinarians to compound. And just by way of history, that originated on the Senate side with Bill Gage. And while Bill was gracious enough to, allow us this flexibility to compound, Bill was very nervous about veterinary assistants. He actually was the person who initiated the VACSP requirement because veterinary assistants were among the only healthcare professionals who handled controlled substances with no oversight at all. So he had a particular eye for the assistant part. How does that translate to compounding? We heard from practitioners yesterday that clearly it's problematic that only RVTs and veterinarians can compound. But the reason why that came about was because if you look parallel in the pharmacy world where compounding is germane, the individuals in the pharmacy world that compound, they have some kind of licensure which verifies their education. And his concern was, well, these are very complicated calculations. And I mean, even the veterinarians, we can tell you, like sometimes we get caught up in our MIGs to KIG and all that. And so he had said, look, yeah, we're going to get you guys where you need to go, but, we're not going to be able to get you everybody. We're going to do it for licensees only. And as you know, at the legislature, it's like a watering hole at the Serengeti. So you just try to get out with your life. And so we said, okay, well then we have to at least do this. And then, let's get into the watering hole and then we'll figure out the rest from there. Yeah. So clearly it's problematic in the profession because, not everybody is an RVT or a DVM. And clearly there are some issues now that are raised. To me, it feels like an omnibus type issue, and my use of the word omnibus is any kind of cleanup language that's non-controversial that we need to just go in for a fix. It feels like that to me. We have some other omnibus type issues like the name tag. We need to change it to name identification because people, are asking if they can, wear a lanyard or a embroidery. Like there's a lot of stuff we have that's kind of piling up that I think can go into a bill. I just think that this year it's a little late for something like that. It's possible, but I think it's a little late. So the CVMA, we are aware of it, and we are trying to, compile that along with others, but we could really actually use some help from the board probably on some of these because, if we take it over to the assembly side, they're probably going to want to know where this is coming from. So I don't know what's going to happen this year.
3 minutes are up.
But, thank you. Go ahead, Dr. Miller.
So I don't know what's going to happen this year, but we are aware of it, and it's a good point that was brought up. It was something that we kind of foresaw, but we took what we could get when we got it. In regard to 2030.3, this is perhaps one of the most confusing sections of our Practice Act that I've encountered in terms of trying to counsel people, and I really appreciate the MDC's efforts to clarify it. And I'm sorry that I was not there yesterday to make comments, but there are still problems that we have. Tara had mentioned that there'll be an opportunity in the July meeting to make further comments, and I'd like to talk to Dick about it. But would you like the CVMA to just submit a letter for the July meeting to just list our comments on what we have concerns, and then we'll just put it in that way? Great.
Thank you.
Sure.
Comments from WebEx?
Pardon?
Oh.
Sorry, Dr. Sullivan. I do have a couple of comments. I'll try to make them quick. It's Bonnie Lutz. My first comment is to address what was questioned about what do we do now if something happens and we've got these regulations. Well, we just do the best we can. Unfortunately, as an attorney, we have to deal with that all the time. It's great that you people are, way ahead of the game in trying to come up with some examples of how your vets are going to handle these regulations. But in a lot of cases, we simply are running blind, and it's just up to us to figure it out when we get before a judge. So, I mean, that's just what we'll do. But that having been said, I do want to emphasize that we don't want to call these suggestions guidelines. because guidelines are looked at by judges as being law. So, you know, it's the other side always argues that. Of course, I argue it if it's in my favor, but that's just another subject. But anyway, if you could call them suggestions or examples or whatever, it makes it a lot easier for us to deal with so that they're not cast in stone and they're not considered law. As far as the RVT issue, I just will say that I've gotten recently a lot of phone calls from, and these are third parties that are putting together businesses where there are RVTs who are going out to homes to provide these services. And I usually get the call, I don't get the calls from the RVTs, I get the calls from the people putting together the businesses. And they are certainly not considering at all the paradigm where the RVT is working for the vet who has established the VCPR. These are RVTs that are working independently, which we all know happens, but it's illegal, and they're doing it. And I know they're doing it because I'm getting calls from the companies that are putting these businesses together. They're looking at this as a great opportunity to make money. So that's just something I wanted you to be aware of. And finally, as far as the experts, I can't emphasize more strongly to make sure that you're getting experts that have expertise in the area that they're reviewing. A lot of veterinarians who want to be experts, kind of the problem you run into is I understand that a lot of people will not want to be experts for the board because they feel that they're throwing their colleagues under the bus or whatever. That having been said, some of the people who want to be experts for the board want to be those experts for the wrong reasons. They want to throw their colleagues under the bus. So they become extremely enthusiastic, and they oftentimes think they have expertise in areas that they don't have expertise in. I mean, I had the opportunity to actually have a
15
hearing.
15 seconds.
15 seconds, okay. Have a hearing where I dealt with this issue where the expert had no experience at all in shelter medicine. My client was a shelter medicine veterinarian, and I argued strongly about the fact that that expert had no experience, and her answer was that she had volunteered a couple of times in a shelter, so that was her extent of her experience. So I just, please make sure that you're getting experts that are qualified. Thank you.
Thank you. Bonnie and Tara, you may correct me here, because I realize we'll be talking about the RVT issue in July. But to assist with one of the things that Bonnie just said, would sort of a more outreach to RVTs, current licensees, about what they can and can't do be helpful? I'm thinking of these companies that are out there recruiting.
Yeah, we can include it on in our next newsletter too.
I think that would be helpful because obviously there is a void there, and people are going to try and fill it in some respects, and I don't want people to get into trouble if they don't realize. Thank you, Bonnie. Any other comments in this room before I move to the moderator? All right, I think, moderator, you can see if there's anyone online with comments on the MDC report. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Board President. I have opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment on agenda item 5, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. We're displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment. All right, I see no requests for comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan. And I think at this moment in time, it's about 10:45. We'll take a 15-minute break for everyone and then be back here at 11 o'clock. Thank you. Are we all good? Moderator, we are ready to begin. It's 11 o'clock. Wait, oh no, we're still missing a couple of board members. Only one. All right. Thank you. So it's 11 o'clock. The next item on our agenda, I am missing, is, excuse me, the interviews with, to fill the vacant MDC veterinarian member on the MDC committee.
Yeah, first, I just wanted to apologize to all of the applicants that did not receive an email from us acknowledging the applications. That was not intentional, and I apologize that it wasn't done, but it will be done in the future. And all of the applicants will receive an email thanking them for their application and encouraging them to apply in the future and also to consider becoming a subject matter expert.
Thank you, Jessica. I guess I'll start very quickly with an acknowledgement again to, I think we have 13 applicants for this position. And of course, Dr. Sullivan is up for reappointment. He's eligible for reappointment, and it's this position, his position that we're talking about here. But I really wanted to thank, considering the incredible pressures on veterinarians' time and the work that the MDC does, it was really impressive to see that many applications from very qualified people. So I want to thank all of the applicants. We have 3 that we're going to interview today, and I'll let Jessica take over the structure of those interviews. But I, at the end of the day, also want to request that applicants reapply when another opening comes up, and also very much take seriously getting trained and becoming an expert, subject matter expert witness for us. We very much could use it, and a lot of the applicants had specific expertise that would be very helpful. So again, thank you very much. It was an incredible turnout.
So members, you all have the MDC questions that were recently revised by the executive committee. So we'll be going down each one in order, and if we can start on the end with Dr. Nunez. The first candidate we have is Dr. W. Kent Fowler.
Is Dr. Fowler here?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, terrific. Thank you. The hybrid situation is still confusing to me. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. Appreciate it.
Thank you for the application.
Okay, I sometimes am challenged with the numbering of these questions, so feel free to give me a signal when my time comes up.
I see.
But this one's easy. Welcome, Dr. Fowler. My first question, or our first question, is why are you interested in this position?
You know, I think I bring to the table some expertise relative to the equine practice. I was a equine practitioner for 27 years on the central coast of California. And in 2004, although it was a very difficult decision to leave private practice, I did so because I had the opportunity to sell the practice. Equine practices are not always easy to sell, and I had a young man that had been riding with me for a number of years, and he was interested in purchasing the practice, and so I made that decision, as hard as it was to leave practice and leave my clients. I actually saw an advertisement which prompted that as well in the CVMA for an emergency veterinarian position in animal health branch under California Department of Food and Ag. And I took that position, and within a year and a half, I was promoted to the animal health branch chief. And I assumed that position for the next 15 years until I retired on December 30th of 2020. It was a move that's as difficult as it was to make. I would probably do it again. I really gained unbelievable experiences in emergency disease task forces. Most of those task forces, I was either the sole incident commander on. Of course, all of our disease emergency we handle under the incident command system. and there was a number of them that were equine, contagious equine metritis, equine herpes myeloencephalopathy, but also a lot of the other species as well. The last 2 years, I worked for CDFA, again as Animal Health Branch Chief. We were down in Southern California for 2 years dealing with the virulent Newcastle disease. And again, I was one of the co-incident commanders on that. And that was a long, drawn-out affair. And one of the reasons I decided another reason I decided to leave private practice and go into regulatory medicine was not only for the additional experience, but to be able to spend a little more time with my family and recreational activities. Well, as it turned out, and my wife would certainly agree with this, I probably put in more hours as Animal Health Branch Chief and all the disease incidents we had than I did in private practice. So that's kind of not a quick, but an overview of my practice experience, both in regulatory medicine and again, 27 years as an equine practitioner on the central coast of California.
Welcome, Dr. Fowler. Nice to see you here, and thank you for your application. I have a question that looks more like a paragraph, so I apologize beforehand.
Several of them there.
Are you familiar with the functions of a licensing board/committee and the laws governing veterinary medicine in California? That's only the beginning. The MDC meets quarterly before all board meetings. Members are typically assigned to several subcommittees, each of which may take 2 to 6 hours per month. Given this information, do you have sufficient time to commit to the MDC for their collaboration, research projects, meetings, etc.?
Well, I'll answer the last part first. Since December 30th of 2020, I have been retired, and it's given me the opportunity to play more golf, although I've learned that breech dystocia in a mare is much easier than to shoot a good round of golf.
Thank you.
More importantly, there's a guilt factor involved. I think I had such an excellent education and practice experience and regulatory experience that I just feel like I still have a lot to give back to the profession. I am familiar with the Veterinary Medical Board, its functions, certainly to regulate licensees, to promote the professional standards, and this is, I think, directly out of your mission statement, and then, of course, the diligent enforcement of professional standards. And I believe there was one other part, Dr. Nolan, to the first part of your question.
I think you covered it very nicely. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
And so I'll take the next one. Excuse me. You've already covered some of this, but how do you feel your education, background, and experience have prepared you for membership on the MDC? And what assets do you think you could bring to the MDC that would complement the current membership of the committee?
Yeah, I think I have answered that to a large degree, but I would like to reiterate the fact my equine background just brings a different perspective, I think, to the board. And so that, I think, is a primary factor. I certainly have the time to put in to the activities of the board, and I have a lot of other activities that occurred as I was Animal Health Branch Chief, whether it was in bill analyses. Now, a lot of my function as Animal Health Branch Chief was to delegate. California is a little bit different than many states as far as their regulatory animal health branch, in that I had anywhere from 23 to 28 veterinarians on staff in my tenure as branch chief. So a lot of my function was to delegate tasks. not only the disease, emergency disease incidents that I mentioned, but all the daily, whether it was bill analyses or, it goes on and on as far as animal health branch. The state divided into 4 districts and had a supervisor in every district, and I think one of the things, and you actually mentioned this at the start of the meeting, how nice it was for you, and I think other board meetings to have, other board members to have everybody in place here in person. That was a really hard thing for me, and I probably would have continued working for CDFA longer if it wasn't for the work from home thing. I'm kind of a get her done guy, and although I had a number of staff, the majority of staff that could be very functional and very productive working from home, I think there's a lot missed in the workplace when you don't have your colleagues right there, when you can walk 20 feet to go over an issue. And that probably contributed to the fact that I retired when I did. It was obvious it was going to go on for a while by the end of 2020. And it's really nice to see people back together and being able to talk face to face. There is a lot missed in the workplace doing it on Zoom or WebEx or not being face to face.
I couldn't agree with you more. Okay, Dr. Bailey.
I have a hard time with these two for some reason. Thank you for coming today and for your application. Certainly. And for your service to our state and keeping us safe. I appreciate that. Okay, so as you may have noticed today, recommendations made by this MDC are based on its consumer protection mandate and are not always popular with the general profession. How do you think you will be able to handle making decisions based on the needs of consumers and their pets that may be unpopular with your colleagues?
Well, I dealt with a lot of unpopular decisions as a regulator throughout my 17 years in CDFA, and the solution is to talk face to face, to the colleagues and to work it out. It's not something you can sweep under the rug and just push forward. I think the other thing that I've thought of a lot kind of along those lines is, well, one of the hardest things, I've said this a number of times, one of the hardest things I ever did was leave private practice and go to work for the bureaucracy. I mean, that was very difficult, but I acclimated, and I think we have to be very careful not to have laws and regulations that either aren't enforced or can't be enforced. I think I saw that a number of times with CDFA where, for whatever reason, the enforcement just didn't take place, and that's a mistake in my mind. You just shouldn't make regulations and laws that you're not going to enforce.
Thank you.
Okay, next question. As a veterinarian, we assume you are familiar with current trends in veterinary medicine, but which issues have affected you directly?
Well, I think it's really interesting, the whole demographic change. Obviously when I was in vet school, I think there was 85% of our class were men and 15% women, and now that reciprocal of that is in effect. I don't think that necessarily creates problems at all. I think the profession has acclimated well to that. The last statistics I saw a couple of years ago, I think it was in the workforce, veterinarian-wise, it was 50-50, men and women, and I would guess, based on class demographics that in another 5 years or so, it'll probably be 70%, 75% women, 25% men. I don't think that's a problem. I think women bring some wonderful ideals and compassion to veterinary medicine. I'm trying to think of other changes that have occurred. I have a lot of concerns relative to the equine profession. I think it is getting harder and harder to have students go that route in school, and I'm concerned about a shortage relative to that. And I think, again, that kind of goes back to the fact of what I said just previously. We don't want to be making laws and regulations that we can't uphold and that aren't reasonable to practice a high quality of veterinary medicine.
Thank you.
Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
So for your next question, I think you kind of touched on this one earlier, but do you have any particular issue that you would like to see the MDC address at this time?
You know, I probably don't, from the standpoint that I've been out of the loop to some degree for a little over a year now. Certainly some of the bills that I've kept a cursory glance on, one would be, this is going back in the memory banks here, but maybe AB 1282, the blood bank that I think you've dealt with. I know Assemblyman Bloom, and we were working on that for a number of years, and certainly with CVMA, with Dr. Grant Miller, was an integral part of those discussions as well. I'm glad to see that has gone ahead and moved forward, and I believe that went into effect as of January 1 of this year. The community blood banks, I think, are a good thing. I think there are concerns relative to that, again, relative to the enforcement, that the quarterly reports that are to be submitted, again, and in my understanding, I believe, to CDFA from those community blood banks, and there's going to be a lot of interest in how that moves forward relative to the in-house commercial blood banks and what their future is. For years, we inspected those commercial blood banks, and you know, I think they did a good job of supplying the needs. So hopefully the community blood banks will do the same, but I think there's some enforcement issues that need to be sure are followed. Other than that, I think any enforcement actions need to be consistent across the board. Obviously, there was a lot of comments this morning, especially relative to equine practitioners, on some of the issues that have happened in the past. I think those are valid concerns and need to be dealt with. And again, I think I come from a slightly different perspective, having been an equine practitioner for the 27 years that I was, and plus all the equine issues I dealt with from a regulatory standpoint as well.
Thank you very much.
Number 7. Can you think of any position that you hold or activities you are currently involved in that may present a conflict for you to serve as a member of the MDC and thus a representative of the VMB?
You know, the only one that I can think of, and I'll be careful how I respond to this because I know you don't want issues brought up as far as disciplinary actions. I was the incident commander down at the LA Equestrian Center. for 86 days. We had that facility under quarantine with the equine herpes myencephalopathy. And I think as board members, you're familiar with that. So I won't give any more details on that because there was some disciplinary action that came out of that. But certainly in a situation relative to that, if that issue should come up again, I would, and I think that would be probably policy on the board as well, that I would recuse myself from that situation based on the fact that I was intimately involved in it back in 2016.
Thank you.
Jamie, I think you have the last one.
The short one.
The short one, yeah.
Yes, I got the longest and the shortest.
This is a yes or no answer?
Yeah, well, we'll see. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the board, Dr. Fowler?
You know, I think I have covered my past pretty well, my experiences. I certainly don't have any sort of a hidden agenda other than I really would like to keep my finger in the veterinary medicine pie, and I'm not ready to be fully retired. My golf game would agree with that, but I think I have a lot to offer. The multidisciplinary advisory committee, and I guess one thing I could add is I'm very familiar with the function of an advisory committee, which is what this position is on. For years, I was a member of the Cattle Health Advisory Committee and also the Equine Advisory Committee through CDFA, and those committees reported directly to the Secretary of Ag. So I think other than that, you're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Fowler. Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you for coming today.
You bet. Thank you.
So our next candidate board members is Dr. Miriam Harvey, and she's participating virtually. I asked the moderator promote her to panelist so we can ask her some questions.
And will we be able to see Dr. Harvey on the screen? Okay.
Board members.
Oops. Can you move that thing? Yeah. There we go. Good morning, Dr. Harvey.
Good morning.
Good morning. I will start you with the first question. I don't know if you saw the last interview, but we have about 8 questions. Okay, thank you. And thank you very much for applying again. So why are you interested in this position?
First of all, again, thank you for having me. I apologize not being able to attend in person. But I have been interested for a few years in getting involved in aspects of veterinary medicine outside of clinical practice. And the last time an MDC spot came up, I actually considered that, had a few circumstances where I wasn't able to apply for that. So one of the reasons why I'm very interested in pursuing it at this time is that I do now have the ability to dedicate the time that I understand is necessary, as well as wanting to really be involved in the promotion of both quality care, quality veterinary care within our state, within our profession. And in addition to that, quality customer service, so it being a part of the Department of Consumer Affairs, having my own pets. I actually have chosen to not practice on my own pets, so I do experience life as a recipient of veterinary care as well, and have had some good experiences and some not so good experiences. So I do understand the consumer aspect of it. To be a great industry, we do need to pay attention to both parts of that, the veterinary medicine part, as well as how are we providing the service that our consumers expect and that they deserve as well. I'm excited to have the potential opportunity to be an active part in that.
Thank you very much.
Good morning, and thank you for coming. I'm not sure if I should look at my screen or your screen or how you're seeing us. So
I know.
So I get the long one this time. I think this one's my fault anyway. But this is a two-part question. So the first part of the question is, are you familiar with the functions of a licensing board committee and the laws governing veterinary medicine in California? And then the second part, the MDC meets quarterly before all board meetings. Members are typically assigned to several subcommittees, each of which may take 2 to 6 hours per month. Given this information, do you have sufficient time to commit to the MDC for their collaboration, research projects, meetings, et cetera?
Yes, thank you. First, yes, I would say that I am familiar with the workings, the general workings of the Veterinary Medical Board and the role that the MDC plays in an advisory capacity to the board. I've practiced clinically in California for about 13 and a half years, and in my current role, I still am very much in charge of the administration of clinical practice, although, you know, maybe perhaps a step removed from that. I do have the time to dedicate, and as I mentioned earlier, that's one of the main motivations that I had for application this time to the MDC. I have the ability to be very flexible with my schedule and do plan, should I be granted this appointment, I do plan to be able to attend in person. To the previous applicant's point, I do see great value in in-person participation and should have no problem filling that requirement.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, next question. How do you feel your education, background, and experience have prepared you for membership on the MDC, and what assets do you think you can bring to the MDC that would complement the current membership of the committee?
I love this question. So how do I feel my education prepares me? As you've seen on my application materials, I was a student at Western University, and I was actually in the second class when the veterinary school opened here in California. What's unique about that education experience is that we're not always directly provided with information. We are very much taught to seek out information, ask questions, investigate, if you will, and to know what our resources are to obtain that information when it's not always readily available to us in the moment. So that's a skill that I learned during my veterinary education that actually is carried through in clinical practice and in many aspects of my life. I'm always seeking out information and seeking to understand and getting perspectives and information from a variety of sources. So I do think that that could be valuable in the issues and topics that the MDC addresses in veterinary medicine. I am going to be able to seek out that information and not, wait for that to just come in the form of one resource. And what can I bring to the committee? I think I can bring a few things. I have a great enthusiasm for our industry. It really saddens me when people are thinking now about, do I recommend that people go into veterinary medicine? Do I not? Yes, there are challenges. There are challenges that come up regularly within our daily jobs within our industry as a whole. But we are well-equipped people to meet those challenges, to figure out ways to make sure that we are upholding our standards. And that's really the second thing that I would say is I bring a high standard of veterinary practice to anything that I contribute to. I believe that we as veterinarians have the responsibility, not only to our clients and our patients, but to ourselves and our industry, to make sure that we are staying current, that we are practicing according to standard of care, according to state and local regulations and guidelines. So I do have a very high standard for veterinary practice.
Dr. New.
Okay, hi, Doctor. For your next question, recommendations made by the MDC are based on its consumer protection mandate and are not always popular with the general profession. How do you think you will be able to handle making decisions based on the needs of consumers and their pets that may be unpopular with your colleagues?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think that anytime an individual is in any type of leadership or, if you will, administrative type position, rather than just saying, hey, this is the way it is and you need to do this just because, one of the most important things is actually explaining the why behind it. And I think when veterinarians understand, and part of the function of the board and the MDC, and me individually, can be to explain, okay, this is the new procedure or what have you, thinking of all of the new compounding guidelines and things like that, that we need to understand why that is happening, right? And if we can go backwards a little bit and understand why and who it is that benefits from this, yes, there may be some additional steps, but in the long run, it's a benefit overall. So to me, instead of just laying down rules or do this, not that, providing a little additional information as to the reasoning behind it, the process behind it, I think is important to gaining compliance and gaining understanding. We may not always gain overt acceptance, but gaining compliance and understanding, I think, is attainable.
Thank you, Doctor.
As a veterinarian, we assume you are familiar with current trends in veterinary medicine, but which issues have affected you directly?
I can think of a couple of issues immediately. I think number one, kind of stepping away from the medicine part of veterinary medicine for a moment and thinking of the overall health and well-being of the people within the industry. I think that has impacted most people. So I think of the unfortunate, suicide rate and mental health crisis that we experience within the veterinary industry for multiple reasons, right? That has impacted me directly, my colleagues, the hospitals that I've worked in, other people, that I know in the industry abroad. So that is certainly something that I think is well worth our attention, and I'm very grateful for a well-rounded perspective and input on bodies like the board and the MDC, having RVTs, doctors, lay people, a variety of people on those boards to help get a little bit better perspective from multiple different angles. That always helps us understand that. And then I would say technology, how, especially since COVID has affected all of our lives, how is technology integrating into veterinary practice on a daily basis with things like telehealth, triage lines, triage phone calls, triage emails, and things like virtual visits as well. So those are a few of the topics that I can think of immediately that have had impact in recent times.
Thank you.
Welcome, Dr. Harvey. I'm in the same boat. I'm not sure where to look at you, but thank you for your application. Do you have any particular issues that you would like to see the MDC address at this time?
Yeah, in listening to the meeting so far this morning, I would say that my primary issues are actually already under review, which I am happy to see. I am a very huge advocate of registered veterinary technicians and their role within our hospitals and in veterinary medicine. And here in California, I am actually very grateful for the alternate route. I do also understand looking at that and making sure that we are not diluting the quality of the training or education that is needed to get an individual licensed as an RVT. But on the job training in the 20 plus years that I've been in veterinary medicine overall, I think is an invaluable resource. And I'm so grateful for our state for not ignoring that in many of our RVT candidates. So that's one thing. Also, I've heard a little bit of talk, and I'm grateful for the foresight in the MDC in talking about the care provider shortage that I think has been discussed pretty widely, especially in regards to RVT roles, clarification of what is possible for them, direct, indirect supervision, BC, PR, and things like that. So those are a couple of the topics that are near and dear to my heart, and I'm glad to hear that they are already under review and look forward to hearing the outcomes of those. And then I would say a continued evaluation of technology in veterinary medicine and how does that fit with our State Practice Act and our regulations that govern veterinary medicine.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Excuse me, again, thank you for being here. Can you think of any positions that you hold or activities that you currently are involved in that may present a conflict for you to serve as a member of the MDC and thus a representative for the VMB?
No, I cannot think of any right now that would present a conflict either professionally or time-wise. The practice that I'm employed by is very supportive of any time commitment necessary and supportive of my own desire to be involved in the administrative process of veterinary medicine within the state.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so is there anything else you would like to share with the board?
I appreciate the broad range of questions that you all have asked. So I think that has hit on the major topics. I again just do want to highlight that I believe the integrity of the veterinary industry going forward is dependent on many things, and that is accountability to our veterinarians to uphold a standard of quality care, integrity within delivering those services to the consumers for sure, making sure that we maintain a good reputation as an industry and as a profession. And I'm excited for the possibility of being a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Excuse me, Dr. Harvey. Sorry for my voice here.
All right, and before we go to the next one, I just wanted to point out something I forgot to point out for all members of the public, both in person and virtually. If you look at the slides on the top right corner, you'll see QR codes, and those are to use from your phone, and it'll go right to the meeting materials for that agenda item. So you are free to use that to follow along with the materials. Our next candidate is Dr. Sullivan.
Welcome back to the table.
Thank you.
Jennifer, I think you have the first.
Oh, I get to start this time. Right. Why are you interested in this position?
Well, surprisingly, I enjoy this work. I much prefer sitting at home with 2 or 3 hours of reviewing regulations to make things work than sitting up there chairing a committee meeting. But It's important work, and I enjoy doing it. I enjoy looking at what others have done and what others have recommended and see if it fits with us. And as I said in my letter, I think the most important thing is when we get a task to do, whether we like it or not, is to make it work. Because you can have the best idea out there, and if you can't put it into practice and make it practical, it's of no use.
I don't know if this is a question that really needs to be asked, but are you familiar with the function of a licensing board / committee and the laws governing veterinary medicine in California? The MDC meets quarterly before all board meetings, as you know. Members are typically assigned to several subcommittees, each of which may take 2 to 6 hours per month. And given this information, do you have sufficient time to commit to the MDC for their collaboration, research projects, meetings, etc.?
Well, maybe you put me last on the list because we're getting close to lunch. So the answers are yes and yes. Definitely familiar with the board's function and what you do, and I have great respect for that. And I do have ample time for the MDC.
Dr. Sullivan, how do you feel your education, background, and experience have prepared you for membership on the MDC? And what assets do you think you can bring to the MDC that would complement the current membership of the committee?
I guess education, we've all had great experience, great educational backgrounds in the veterinary schools that we've all attended. We're very fortunate that way. And then 40 plus years of practice. You know, probably the greatest experience in that practice is that our practice is in a middle class, lower middle class community, and kind of one of the new buzzwords in access these days is increment of care. And when you're in that kind of a practice, we're doing that every day because you know our clients can't always afford all of the blood tests and x-rays. And so we've been doing that for years, and we felt very comfortable in doing it because a lot of the clients, actually we would get clients that went to a specialty practice, an emergency clinic. They couldn't afford the service, so the emergency clinic would send them to us because they knew how we worked. And looking back over these years, I would say some of our very, very best clients were those that couldn't pay the full amount, and 90% of them did over time and became great clients and many friends. So I think that experience has helped me looking at the work that we do on the MDC to make sure that things work at the practical level and not necessarily looking at the gold standard all the time.
Thank you.
Thank you for your continued interest in helping, Dr. Sullivan. Recommendations made to the MDC are based on its consumer protection mandate and are not always popular with the general profession. How have you been able to handle making decisions based on the needs of consumers and their pets that may be unpopular with your colleagues?
Well, I think it's been already mentioned. You have to sit down and talk to them, and that's the main reason that the MDC has felt it important to get education material out to our licensees so they know what we're doing on this compounding issue. You know, we can pass regulations and sit around and wait for complaints, or we can get out ahead of it as much as we can and help our licensees comply. So I think that's critical in the work the MDC does. it's communication. It's whether it's a disgruntled client, and being the owner of the practice, you have to get up on the phone and take care of it, or whether it's a licensee or a friend who disagrees with what you're doing, have a conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Sullivan, as a veterinarian, we assume you're familiar with current trends in veterinary medicine, but what issues have affected you directly?
Oh, boy. Well, I guess a couple that have impacted me, not personally, but impacted me as I look at the profession. Probably the two biggest have been on the table and are on the table. One is telemedicine. How do we address that so that it does protect the consumer? There's just, I'm just amazed at how many attorneys are out there promoting telemedicine like it's done in human medicine. That bothers me a little bit because I don't think our patients are four-legged people. I think they're different. I think they mask their symptoms till they absolutely can't anymore. And I think that initial exam in person or acquaintance with the facility is very important. The other issue that we're dealing with is the compounding issue. We could have sat back and waited for the laws and regulations to be passed and then find ourselves in a position where we legally couldn't be doing clinical compounding or compounding in a clinical setting. And then we'd be forced to either break the law or stop compounding. So those two issues have been a couple that I've been concerned about and working on for years, and there are others. You can just look at the MDC list there, but those two I have not a personal interest, but an interest in based on the profession.
Thank you.
Hello, Dr. Sullivan, and thank you. I echo Dr. Nolan's sentiments. Thank you for your continued interest and participation. I think this was just answered, but I'll ask it again. Do you have any particular issues that you would like to see the MDC address at this time?
No, I'll leave that up to you guys. I think our plate is pretty full, but if you direct us to do more work, we will surely do it. The people on the committee are committed to it. I think it's a great committee, and I enjoy working with them.
Okay, can you think of any positions you hold or activities you're currently involved in that may present a conflict for you to serve as a member of the MDC, which is a representative of the VMB?
I don't think so. The only other two entities that I work with is AAVSB. I'm on a policy committee there. I don't see any conflict of interest there. I'm also on the board of directors of AVMA. There is some potential conflict there. I informed them that I am on the task force or the advisory committee here, and I'm sure that if there is any conflict, if I don't recognize it, our attorney and the AVMA attorney will let me know for sure, but I don't see anything that's obvious at this time.
Last question. Is there anything else you would like to share with the board?
Only as with the first question, I do enjoy doing this work, and I also have great empathy for the decisions that you have to make. I've been there, so I know what you're going through, and I also very much enjoy working with our staff. I like the give and take that goes on between Jessica and Tara and whatever subcommittee I'm on or the MDC. It's a good working relationship that I think brings to you good research and hopefully good products.
Good. Thank you, Dr. Sullivan.
Thank you.
Thank you. And again, I want to thank everyone who applied, and specifically Dr. Fowler, Dr. Harvey, and Dr. Sullivan. And I'll say what I always say, I wish we had more positions to fill, and not only for the quality of our candidates, but also for the amount of work the MDC has. So, but I realize we have a structural limit there. I wanted to do things differently this time than we've done in the past, and what I'd like to do is poll the members on their first choice rather than do a nomination, and then we'll see if there's a consensus between these three candidates. And again, obviously it's always a difficult decision with the quality of folks. Dr. Nunez, do you want to give me your first choice?
Dr. Sullivan.
Thank you. Dr.
We're going down the line.
I was just going to go this way since it's easier.
Well, I have a tie, and I'll be honest, I am so grateful for Dr. Sullivan and all that he's done and his expertise, especially in the compounding. I think we'd be in a world of hurt. Not that we aren't already struggling with some things, but I do think that, you know, Dr. Fowler, and I appreciated all three candidates, but I feel like it's getting, I feel like we are really, really at a crossroads when it comes to having representation on the board and the MDC that has food animal and equine background and expertise. And so I really am struggling because I think that Dr. Fowler would bring that, as well as, you know, I've done a little bit of work with the EOC regionally and on campus, and it really does give you a very broad and very in-depth understanding of what's going on, boots on the ground. And so I'm going to say it's a tie, and I really appreciated Dr. Harvey and what she would bring, but I think that at this point my two votes would be for Dr. Sullivan and Dr. Fowler. I didn't help you, did I?
What did I do? Okay, no, that's fine. All right, I'm marking you down. Okay, do you want to go here? Maria, sorry, Dr. Salcedo.
This is tough. I liked, you know, working with Dr. Sullivan, and I think he has brought a lot of good things to the MDC, but recognizing Dr. Fowler's experience with regulations and also dealing with the broader scope of the industry, I'm kind of torn, but I'm kind of leaning towards Dr. Fowler.
Okay. Jennifer?
I want to first comment that once again, we had three amazing candidates.
Yeah.
And I want to take a moment because everybody's been so supportive of RVTs, and I'm going to ride that wave. We have in the audience our immediate past chair of the MDC, who is an RVT. And she stated when she was appointed to the MDC 6 or 7 years ago that she had applied more than once. So what I've seen over the past 8 years on this board is we have amazing candidates, and the candidates that are not chosen don't reapply. So because we only have one position today, I would ask that the other candidates please reapply so that you too can have celebrity status like our immediate past chair, Christy Pulowski, who is an RVT. But my comment for who I choose, I think that each one brings something to the table. Dr. Fowler, obviously, with his equine experience. Dr. Harvey has a diverse background, and she's very supportive of RVTs. I heard that. But Dr. Sullivan is my choice. He not only has the institutional knowledge, he has the institutional memory. He served on the board for quite a period of time. He has so many connections in the industry with his AVMA position. He works, I don't know who wrote the question saying that the MDC subcommittees take 2 to 6 hours. I think they meant 2 to 6 weeks in 1 month. Dr. Sullivan, he is the chair of the committee, and I can tell you that when we did lose our previous chair, we were struggling to find leadership. And there has been quite a change in the makeup of the MDC, and maybe there are some veterinarians who are, you know, very busy at this time, but Dr. Sullivan has never slacked on anything, so he is my choice.
Thank you. Bradley.
That was said very well, thank you. And I actually feel very much the same as Ms. Laredo. I am very impressed with Dr. Fowler and his experience, and had, I think if our board or the MDC was made up if we had people who had Dr. Sullivan's knowledge and experience and dedication, like that were still going to be on the board, we're just, or rather on the MDC, it may be a different story, because I am also, like Dr. Nolan, torn in that regard, but for all the reasons that Ms. Laredo spoke of, my choice is Dr. Sullivan.
Oh, now down to, excuse me, down to me. And I agree. I really, excuse me, it was hard to go through these applications and selecting Dr. Fowler and Dr. Harvey, Dr. Sullivan to come before the board was really because of their unique expertise and what we're always looking for as far as the MDC is concerned and the board. And my choice is Dr. Sullivan for many of the reasons that Jennifer said, for continuity particularly. Although I really agree that we need some. Dr. Fowler's CDFA experience also was I thought helpful and would be helpful to the board. So what I would choose Dr. Sullivan would be my choice, but I would really encourage Dr. Harvey and Dr. Fowler to look to the board for other ways of participating if they are not selected in a subject matter expert, or there may be other ways as well, but and including all the applicants, because there were other very good applicants as well. But so that is my choice. And I think Dr. Nunez, sorry.
I feel embarrassed because I thought it was just a poll question.
A poll question.
But I just want to acknowledge the applicants, the experience that they would bring. And I would also like to acknowledge the ones who applied but didn't make the final cut.
Yes,
because I really get excited about people coming to our meetings and paying attention. But I must also acknowledge the experience and the amount of dedication that Dr. Sullivan has given to this profession. I do and always will consider him to be my mentor. I look up to him greatly and admire him very much, and he has my full support.
Thank you. Dr. Noah.
Yeah, I wanted to publicly also express regret to Dr. Boyer and other candidates that did not hear from the board. I know that was an oversight, not intentional, and I would like to publicly apologize as well. And remember, I think it was Jamie, Dr. Sexton went through this process, and we agonized, and there are several of those. I'd like to definitely encourage any of the candidates that don't make the final appointment to reapply, because I think you bring a lot. Both of you, all three of you, bring a lot to the table.
At this point.
So we still do need a motion to appoint a candidate to the MDC. And if we're counting Dr. Norton's 2 votes, we have 2 people who had selected Dr. Fowler and 5 that selected Dr. Sullivan, but we still need a motion to appoint and then public comment and then vote. But I counted Dr. Nolan twice because she had a tie.
She got 2 votes.
Yeah.
Motion to appoint Dr. Sullivan.
Second.
Now, before we go to a vote, this would be the time for public comment. And I'm interested in anyone in this room, and then I'll turn it to the moderator for online. Seeing nobody rising to public comment here, moderator, I almost said Dr. Moderator, would you open it up?
Thank you, Madam Board President. I've opened up the Q&A panel. If any member of the public would like to comment on agenda item 6, please type comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists, or you may simply raise your hand. We are displaying instructions and we'll give you a moment.
I know.
All right, I'm seeing no requests for comment at this time. Shall I close the Q&A panel?
Yes, please.
Okay, it's closed.
So we have a motion to appoint Dr. Sullivan. I think we can call for the vote.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Noland?
I abstain.
Dr. Nunez?
Yes.
Dr. Solicito?
Yes.
Ms. Bowler?
Yes.
Motion carries. Congratulations.
And again, I want to reiterate what we've been saying, and the letters that will go out to all the applicants will again address this to encourage folks to reapply. I cannot recall when the next veterinary opening is for the MDC, but we will get that out. And also to consider becoming a subject matter expert for the board, particularly for those that have some specific expertise that may be a unique situation for us. So, thank you.
So I also was wondering, do we know when the next, I think Dr. Nunez's position is in grace period is there, when's the next appointment for the board? I'm just curious.
You mean the governor appointee?
The governor's appointments?
Is Dr. Nunez a governor appointee?
Yes. Yes.
And then is he going to be appointing someone soon, or?
We anticipate that, yes.
And it's by June, or is there a date?
I don't have that answer.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, very soon you won't have me to kick around anymore. I think Nixon said that.
Yeah, I don't know, is the lunch here? Okay, I think at this time we'll break for lunch, and there has been lunch order for board members. For other individuals here, the little cafeteria is open through the hallway, and that has sandwiches, salads, I think, and soft drinks and whatnot. Oh, yeah, let's adjourn, recess until 1 o'clock. Thank you very much.